Good afternoon and welcome to the special Tribeca Festival edition of My Harlem Portraits, the show that aims at shedding a light on the fundamental contribution of African Americans to the building of this country and on Black excellence. Today we have two very important guests to talk to us about their movie, Black Table, that is having its premiere at the Tribeca Festival on June 8th in the Spotlight sections. The two directors are John Antonio James and Bill Mack. Welcome to My Harlem Portrait.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Appreciate it.
Bill, I am envious. I don't know where you are, but I can hear birds singing.
Yeah, I'm upstate New York. I'm in Beacon, New York right now, but I'm headed to the city right after this interview to do some. They're taking some photos for the Tribeca Festival. But yeah, we're really excited to be premiering there. We're really excited about the film. We have several people from Harlem in the film, and you know, it covers a lot of different ground. It talks about affirmative action. It talks about the story of Black people in the Ivy League, and just generally what it's like and why Black tables form, both, you know, at school or in the workplace.
This story takes place in a very important historical context because it coincides with moments in American cultural wars, which are very pivotal for your country, for our country. Can you tell us a little bit about that? James?
John, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, I think the significance of the culture wars is that it's part of the story that we're telling. We were focused on a very special moment in higher education when elite private universities, places like Yale, were admitting more Black and brown students than they had in their history. And it was clear that it was a clear sign that affirmative action policies were working. And, you know, Bill and I are looking around on campus and we're seeing that this is a strange moment in the sense that in my class, there were more Puerto Ricans, I think, than at any other time in Yale's history. I think there were 33 that year. And also in my class, the number of Black students hit a very high watermark as well. And it was a special time. And if you recall, this is when Clinton runs into the headwinds of Newt Gingrich's contract with America. And at that point, both parties are really having a difficult time trying to siphon off independent votes, the precious votes that haven't exist between those who've declared themselves hardcore Democrats and hardcore Republicans. And preferences becomes a hot button issue. And they realize that by talking about and framing preferences in a way where it's you took something that I deserved and doesn't belong to you, and positioning it that way, they could really rile up their base. And in the end, it could mean precious votes, at least from the Republican side. And that might be a little too heavy-handed. But you can see with the culture wars and Clinton and his mend it, don't end it policy, that he has to cater to that he has to govern accordingly. And it gets nasty. You know, in the film, we talk about an ad, Senator Jesse Helms' hands ad, where there's a hands crumpling a piece of paper saying, you needed that job, but they effectively gave it to a minority. These are strategies that worked. Harvey Gantt lost his election because of that ad. You know, David Duke wasn't as successful in his race for Senate, but he peeled off 60% of the white vote, and he'd owed that to preferences and all of the mishigas surrounding preferences. So it's a time when we really begin to turn on each other as Americans.
Sounds like a time I know now.
Very, very familiar, correct?
Very, very familiar. And what you were saying is really when you start from the point of view that the white man in America has the privilege of going to Yale and not anybody else. So if you see that point of view, obviously they've lost it, you know. So Can you touch, Bill, can you touch on the 1994 incident at the school on the campus that involved 8 Black students and the consequences that it brought, like the Naples Black boycott?
Yes. So the incident actually happened in the fall of 1990, but it was to the freshman class, which was the class of 1994. Okay, so they had just set foot on campus. They're 17, anywhere from 17 to maybe 19 years old, and they're confronted. They go to a pizza place, which is a known drinking spot, and they're essentially thrown out of there. They're told to get out because they were drunk. They weren't. They're told to get out because they were Black, essentially. And when they asked, can we get a bag to bring our food? They said, no bag, get out. So they were thrown out of the place. They were thought to be not Yale students, but perhaps townies, like, Black people who are from New Haven, who are generally poor and looked down upon. They were thrown out, and they went directly across the street to their dorm, where one of the students lived. And there's a gate that you have to go through to get there. Well, then the one of the owners of the restaurant and the police followed them into the gate.
Oh my God!
And they said, "There's that Black punk," and they ID'd them, who were the Yale students. And so this became an issue on campus. One of our cast members, who tells the story much better than I do, was almost expelled as a result of this. It sort of backfired. It was as if the Black students were, just making it up. And that was pretty much set the stage for what would be the 1990s Black table. Okay, that incident happened in 1990, the fall, and the class that we focus on arrived on campus in 93. Okay, the context they came in on is clouded or almost created by this incident that happened back in 1990, and I think that's part of the story we tell. We tell a lot of the political stuff with archival material, and we have some experts who are expert historians of affirmative action and just, social studies, Black studies, psychology. But we are really telling a human story about a special class and how they felt when they first got into Yale, and really how they feel now. And it's sort of a retrospective. And this is right on the eve, as we were filming, it was the eve of the Supreme Court making a decision to effectively end affirmative action for higher education consideration admissions. So, it's a special story. It's a moment in time. It's not, some of our cast lives in Harlem. It's not like an urban Black story. It's actually the story of really high achieving Americans who happen to be Black, who were helped by a program that, helped them that may not be there to help the next generations. So it's a moment in time. It's a capsule.
It's a very special and very important moment in time. And I did not understand. So the people, the cast are the real people who went to that class in Yale?
Absolutely, yeah. We have the class of people from the class of 92 through 97. We're covering them, and during this, the reunion for the class of 97 occurred, and that's part of the film as well. So the 25th reunion. So we're looking at, they were the largest class that had set foot, of Black people who had set foot on campus back in 1993. And now we're looking at, in 2020, in the early 2020s, they're basically 50. What are they doing now? What have they achieved? What are their thoughts of how their experience was, and what are they doing to contribute really to the greater good?
Fantastic. I didn't understand that. That's very, very, very good. I'm excited to watch this movie. When did you decide that you wanted to examine what you call the third rail of American politics, racial preferences, as you put it. And how did you go about it?
I'll take that one. I think it's because we were initially interested in the stories at the Black table. I think the Black table comes first because it's quite a phenomenon in the mid-90s at Yale. If you go into this dining hall that looks like it's been airlifted out of Oxford in England and placed in New Haven, Connecticut, and you walk in for the first time as a freshman, it's hard not to notice that the Black students have created a table that basically goes across the length of what is like a hangar size, you know, an airplane hangar size cafeteria. And I had finished my first film. I don't know why I started thinking about the table. I called Wesley Morris, who is one of the cast members, and I really just wanted to know what was going on in that table. And if we could just recruit a few students to tell us about the experience of what it initially looked like self-segregation. And from my perspective, from the non-Black perspective, how they dealt with all the stares they got from everyone else who saw it as a form of self-segregation, or who just looked at the table because it was very loud and happy. And I wanted to find out what was going on. I wanted to learn a little bit more. And through the course of these interviews, a story emerged where we had a spine of the movie that not only talked about why that table was a safe harbor for them, what was talked about there, what it meant to them, but you also get at things like, well, the table is courtesy of affirmative action to a degree. O.J. Simpson has a very big role in what that table means later on as they're moving towards graduation. And it becomes a lens to talk about race in America. It's not just the table. The table is a device, and it is looking at this snapshot in time, a time capsule, as Bill calls it, to get a different perspective of what it meant to be Black in America, but specifically, and I feel like this is our contribution to the medium, not only Black in America, but at an elite private university that is the corridor to the halls of power in the United States of America. And I don't think people put that lens on the Black student education, higher education experience very often.
That's right. That's right. What do you think, Bill, about this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think we chose a very unique lens, and you know, I think that everybody involved has a lot to say about their personal experience, and I think our goal here is to get outsiders to feel like they actually are sitting at the table and getting insiders feel, because it's not something a lot of people are intimidated by, threatened by it, but it's not something that should be intimidating. It's just some interaction, group dynamics, and it's just because Black people are so obviously Black that they stand out. Other people are getting together for different reasons, but it's just not so obvious. And frankly, the table itself resembles a table that used to be at my godmother's house. You know, once a month we would have dinner there in Amsterdam and 93rd Street, and just talk, you know, and we would just talk about New York politics. This is like throughout the 80s, basically, Mayor Koch, police brutality, everything that was going on there. And we did that in the privacy of our home. The film is about Black folk who had that experience coming to an elite institution and having to create that environment on their own in a dining hall, as just a place to feel safe, you know, as a place to feel like they were at home and just, you know, doing the same thing that I grew up doing. So I think, you know, that's what it is for me. I think it's something that both insiders and outsiders should say. Like, if you're an insider, you say, wow, yeah, I remember that. That's what I need. I still have one of those at work. I wish I had one of those at work. That's you know, these people I care for, they're my family. Yeah.
You need a big hole for that, right?
For sure.
we didn't mention, or I didn't mention, you both went to Yale. All right, so this is an
Correct, yes.
inside story from inside people, told by inside people. So this makes it even more interesting and fascinating. The last question, because they're telling me we're out of time. Your movie is absolutely timely, especially against the backdrop of the recent 2023 Supreme Court ruling against admission of to colleges taking into account race. This is really the beginning of dismantling not only affirmative action in education, but it's just the beginning of everything else. What can we do to stop it? Apart from changing the Supreme Court.
That's right. I think we would have to start there. I think you have your answer. There is no need to ask the directors. There's what do we do to stop it? Local elections probably bubbles up, civic engagement, advocacy. This is the culmination of what starts during the Reagan years, as we all know on this call. And Reagan was a little less successful in pulling this off because he had to take the temperature of, he had to take, we weren't there yet. Affirmative action had support. So he wasn't able to do his lieutenants, Edwin Meese and all of those guys, they couldn't dismantle it to the degree that they wanted.
Early.
But that is when you begin to say, or they begin to say, there is an effective way to frame preferences so that we really piss people off and we get them to think that they deserve that seat at the table. One of the things, my daughter just applied to college, and we talk about how she's playing musical chairs. There are 400 people in the game and only 2 chairs to sit at. Wow. And yet every one of those 400 people thinks they deserve one of those 2 seats. And when it comes to the Black student in this particular case, and I have a bias and Bill can disagree, they just tend to get the focus. Whereas the kid who got in because he can throw a ball from third base to first base, or the beefy lineman who's playing on the football team, or the gymnast, or the child of an alumnus who gets in with very, very low scores, but we all know that there is a wink nod as to what kind of contribution can be made from the parents. Unfortunately, the Black student, in my mind, doesn't get a pass. I did not answer your question on purpose. I don't know what we can do, but I'm optimistic that this decision has gotten people motivated about how it's going to move into other sectors. And as you know, it's going to move from higher education into the workplace. Yeah. And that is going to be very quick.
And that's going to adopt it very fast there.
Yeah, unless we vote. I can't vote because I only have a green card. So I'm very frustrated by this. But unless we vote in the right way, because these are, I think, in my lifetime, the most important elections I've been to in my life.
Absolutely.
Agree.
Yeah, voting and I would say, just trying to help your own. I think a lot of what we're fighting against in terms of elitism is just sort of like railroads like that are already created. So, when the school was all white men, they had a railroad into every industry. That was a direct lineage. Like you're going to go into banking, you do this. You go into insurance, you do this. But as diversity takes over, those railroads need to be extended. But we need to do the same thing with our other social organizations and just keep them, growing. Right? You got to bring up the next person. And before, diversity was the same guy. Now we have to make sure when it's our turn, we bring up someone from our community. And I think that's where if we don't do that, then laws aren't even going to help us, right? So we definitely have to do both voting and also be socially conscious. When someone makes it, they got to help others. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this very inspiring and insightful conversation. I am so happy to talk to someone who is from Harlem and has been doing all the things that you've been doing, because being that it's such a short time, I didn't have the time to introduce you and what you both did. So thank you for that. And
Thank you very much.
I see you at the premiere.
Appreciate it.
And thank you again for what you're doing. Bye-bye.
See you at the premiere.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Premiere of Black Table, and this is a Q&A with the directors and two of
So
the
I guess my
subjects.
first question is, what was the genesis of this project? Like, what was the thing that kind of started this?
So I'd made a film in 2020 that went to Sundance called Siempre Luis with Luis Miranda. And after that film, I had a lot of time to think about my next film because we were in COVID. And so I don't know how the Black Table got on my radar and how I started to think about it, but I called Wesley Morris and I said, I have an idea. And I ran it by him, and he liked it. He didn't dissuade me from sort of calling a few folks, namely Sheldon, who I knew sat at the table, and everyone seemed to be excited. So we rented this manor that serves as the backdrop of all the interviews, Alder Manor on the banks of Hudson. It's beautiful, beautiful manor, and we were able to get it for next to nothing because it was COVID. And we rolled camera for a day, and it was just, we got beautiful stories. And at that point, I thought, okay, I turned to Katie Tabor and I was like, I think there's something here, and she agreed. And then my next phone call was Bill Mack. I think that's where you come in.
Yeah, I guess. I wasn't there to start the project. John actually looked at it sort of as an outsider while we were at school. And he showed me a clip that was just a little sizzle reel, and I said, wow, this is my whole life in this clip. Like, these are all my friends. This is my experience, and you nailed it so far. Well, how can I help? You want me to sit down and do an interview? You need me to assist in any way possible? And we wound up pitching this thing together, and after a lot of no's, finally we got a yes from fifth season folks, and they helped us get started, and from there we just took off. We went back and did more interviews, and just it was just amazing cathartic experience that we all went through, and we were able to just investigate it, and that's it. I mean, we interviewed Sheldon again, and we interviewed Diane, and we just kept going, and that's how we got here.
What was the, it must be an interesting process making a film where your friends are on screen. So what was the process of choosing which friends to call? And then for Diane and Sheldon, why did you say yes?
I'll start. Darren was known as the mayor of the Black Table. So of course, after Sheldon, you call Darren, and then Darren's like, well, you have to talk to Imani Perry, of course. And when we interviewed Imani Perry, we interviewed Imani Perry twice. And after the second interview, we knew that we had a feature, because she literally walks on water. I mean, she's the spine of the movie, and she tells us, she narrates the stories of the 90s. It's more than just the table. The table is a lens to talk about race. But after that, I think we were feeling pretty confident that we had the pieces to put a 95-minute film together. But basically, Darren got us to Imani, who gets us to Diane, Bill gets us to Misha. So it's crowdsourcing, essentially. I mean, we crowdsourced the film.
I had a number of reasons to say yes. One was, I just do think it's an amazing story. I think it's an untold story. Prior to my current position, I helped to lead the Time Warner Foundation. And so I was in the business of funding diverse storytellers. And I just felt like this was one of these stories that I would have loved to have been able to fund. And so I think my first reason was that. And then my second reason, you know, JJ was smart. He had the right people ask me. So when Amani says, I spoke to them, they're fine. I was like, oh, okay, so I'm gonna make the time. So it was, it was about what it was, but it also was about the intelligence of figuring out who needed to be your messengers, and figuring out how to motivate us, so.
Yeah, well, so I think when John calls, you pick up. That's first and foremost. He's absolutely brilliant, and I knew he would actually steward the story very carefully. We've actually been friends since freshman year, and oftentimes we talk about race. John actually introduced me to the Yale Law School Library. Everyone knew that's actually where I lived. And he's Italian, Puerto Rican. We spoke about issues around race, growing up in New York. And there was a quiet understanding why we need to be in that library. And there's some entrapments around that as well, but I knew that this story was in very responsible hands. And we mentioned that Bill was involved. I'm like, wow, this is gonna go next level. And it was just a deep honor. And I then told John, I said, there are a few people that need to be included in this. You gotta have Diane, you gotta have Orlando, right? Steve Maddox, many other people, Darren, there's a bunch of people that in many ways were the epicenter of that experience, and so I'm just really honored that he included us.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the film is a personal story film at heart, but we also went into it thinking this is like we're in this major culture war moment, right? We had just seen the COVID, the end of the Trump presidency, all like we're on the verge of civil war culturally. And John was like, well, in the 90s, this was already going on. And the topic was what we experienced, affirmative action. So this was a thread that was created from personal stories. Everyone we talked to with their high school to college experienced, you got in because of affirmative action. So that made it part of it. Like we didn't say, hey, we need to make a film about affirmative action and start like try to make like the Ken Burns style doc. But because everyone was talking about it, we had to include it. And then obviously it synchronized with the Supreme Court decision. So we said we need to get more of a backdrop. We need to, there are things that were in the movie that were relevant to, Black students and New Haven, which is a huge topic, being black as a student versus New Haven being black. Some of that stuff we have to eliminate and just focus and just say, you know what makes this most relevant is that we're telling the story of extremely talented Americans who happen to be black, but their status is always questioned just because they're black. And that is what affirmative action, in a way, the fact that it's ended, at least that badge of dishonor is taken away. Okay, the other effects of it are most likely going to be negative, but the psychological effect of that is part of what we're addressing in the film. And hopefully there will be less of that, going forward, because that is in terms of like the cathartic experience, it's going back and saying, wow, that really hurt me. That hurt me when my gym coach or my baseball coach suggested that I got in only because I was black, even though, as Diane said, she was the captain in 3 sports, and the person who asked her was riding the bench. Okay? So,
That's what she said, by the way.
Yes, she did say.
And I think we would joke that it was going to line up, that this decision was going to happen when we were done with the film, and you could see that it was a policy that was being stripped away, and that there were numerous challenges being filed, and at some point it was going to happen. So I think sort of towards the 3rd year of filming, we realized that it was just a matter of time and that it would happen.
Yeah, and it's like the demise of affirmative action, but it's also the rise of people who benefited from it in the 90s. And, across the board, I think everyone's extremely successful. One thing when I first looked at that clip, I was like, wow, I haven't seen this. I've seen a lot of black trauma types of stories, but I haven't seen well-adjusted, successful, intelligent Black folks sitting and just talking. And we just try to bring everyone into that discussion and let them experience this Black table that maybe, you know, if they weren't part of it, maybe you could see what was really going on. And it's nothing sinister, you know, it's nothing to be afraid of. In fact, you're welcome to join, because we're just coming to a safe place, some place that's comfortable. And if you're interested in being part of that table, then come, please join us.